everyone to the Lamoille Chamber of Commerce March Legislative Update. This month's legislative update is sponsored by Edward Jones, Rich Jacobs Financial Advisor. In attendance, we have some of our local representatives. We have Avram Patt, Dave Yacovone, Senator Richard Westman, Representative Kate Donnally, and Representative Noyes. We also have in attendance a couple of our Lamoille Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. We have Deb Lindemer and John Mandeville. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator, Jeff Lindemer of L2 Training and Consulting.
Good morning, folks. We have quite a few people registered today, and hopefully they all have power. But we've heard some power outages. So, and we're going to get a couple legislators joining us a little bit later. So we will start the introductions. What we do is we let the representatives and senator talk about issues on their plate, and then when they're finished, we will open it up for questions and comments. So since Avram's right next to me on the screen, Avram, do you want to start?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I just gotta put my earbud in here. Yeah. So in terms of the legislature, I mean, in the House, a lot has gone on in the last 2 weeks. A lot of bills, made it to the floor, made it out of committee, including, the budget bill, the capital bill, some of the money bills. In terms of what I've been working on as a member of the House Energy and Technology Committee, our big broadband bill made it to the floor. It passed. It passed on a roll call vote of, I think, 145 to 1, which was gratifying. It's a big bill. It's a comprehensive bill, and really, we had originally put some money into it in consultation with the Appropriations Committee, mostly to increase the amount of lending possible to the communication union districts around the state, but then ended up being able to put of the ARPA, the new federal relief program that was signed into law just very recently. We're putting $150 million into that, which is a lot of money. But 2 years ago, it was estimated by a study commissioned by the Department of Public Service that to get fiber, true high-speed internet to every location that is unserved or underserved now, at that point, the estimate was it would cost about $1 billion. There has been some installation and connection that has occurred in the meantime, so there's a few less locations that need to be served. But that's really the magnitude of the gap in getting high-speed internet to everyone. But this would be a big step. Obviously, has gone to the Senate. And we'll see in a bill of this magnitude, there are inevitably some changes proposed by the other body. We'll see what happens there. But I think the vote in the House shows how fully understood it is across the board that this is a major issue for Vermont. Another issue that we are dealing with, as people know, is the underfunded pensions for teachers and state employees. I am very concerned about that, and wish we were talking, in addition to some changes that need to be made in the structure of the pension fund, the contribution benefits. Some changes will need to be made there. The ones that were proposed last week were draconian, harsh, would cause existing state employees to have to work for 7 or 10 more years than they were expecting to. And I'm very troubled by that. And I wish we were putting as much emphasis in talking about the state's commitment to that, as well as instead of just leading with the changes that might be put upon our state employees and our teachers. A lot of other bills of interest to me. We passed a bill regarding child care that was very important to me. We passed a bill, this is in the House only at this point, passed a bill that would begin and maybe open the door to the state again providing assistance to schools around infrastructure, which is a very big problem around the state of really buildings that need significant repair without the resources to do that. So I think I'll just stop there and let whoever's next take it away.
Thank you, Avram. Next, I think I'll run through the representatives before I get to our senator, Dave Yacovone. Dave, how are you this morning?
I'm great, thank you. Good to see everybody, and thanks for sponsoring this. I'll try to be brief. Last week, or maybe it was a week before, I lose track of time, my committee on appropriations, not only did we pass out the budget, but we passed out 15 bills that had appropriations to them. And a lot of people may not, it probably doesn't sound like anything or much of a heavy lift, but I tell people, imagine having a family wedding, a high school graduation, and Christmas or Hanukkah all in 1 week. And that's what it's like when these things are coming through there. It's people talk about March Madness in the halls of Zoom, so to speak. So it was a wild but fun time. We were able to augment what Avram said, what I think are some significant investments. I was particularly pleased with the help of Dan Noyes and others, certainly in the House, but Dan's on the committee of jurisdiction, make some investments into the social safety net. And while they're modest, they're the first ones that have been made in several years. We've provided at least a 2% cost of living increase to the some of the social safety net providers. We have what's called our designated agencies that provide mental health and developmental services. We have our long-term care folks, home health, area agencies on aging, adult days, which provide a lot of help for what we call the Choices for Care program to help people live in their homes. That was important to me. This is my 5th year on appropriations, and it's the 5th year in a row that the administration has not recommended any increase for these folks. So I'm glad we're asserting ourselves. It's important. And I'm hoping our friends in the Senate will work their magic, and you never know that 2% could become 3%. I'm looking at Rich. Put a little
I was just thinking, you and I need to sit down and I figure out exactly what you did do.
Well, I'll help you through that. I'll help you through that. Yeah, you'll appreciate the orchestration on that one. We put $5 million toward our adult day centers, which play a critical role in helping people, elders, particularly in developmentally delayed, stay in the community. And though 3 of them have closed this year, so the safety net is very fragile in a number of different ways. We also set aside $150 million towards the pension problem. Doesn't cure it in any way, but it will certainly help. We set aside over $50 million for what we call workforce development, much of that targeted for the state colleges. So I feel we've made significant assistance for that second bridge year for our state colleges to help them through their transformation. There's a lot of other things that we've done. Most of it, not all of it, but most of it credited to the Federal Recovery Act that just went through a little while ago. The key will be, of course, transitioning. I don't think so much in FY23. I think more in FY24, but that's a different inside baseball, perhaps. We did set aside some money in our reserves to help us bridge through as the economy changes with all the different investments that are being made. So that has kept us busy, and it will continue to as we deal with the bill that we sent to the Senate earlier on H315, and all good things. There's some weighty things coming toward us, most namely, I'd say the pension, and we'll do our best to figure that out in a fair way. But thanks for having me. I look forward to questions.
Thank you, Dave. Next on my list is Dan. Dan Noyes.
Morning. Thanks for having us this morning. Appreciate it. And thanks, Dave, for the shout out there. That was really nice of you. It was good to see that 2% increase from our appropriations committee for the home and community-based providers. And it was also good that a bill that we've been working on, H153, which really looks at how we provide the reimbursement rates for the home and community-based providers by really looking at what what these services cost, because we really don't have a good idea on what it costs to deliver services for older Vermonters who are receiving care in their homes, or people with traumatic brain injury. So that was a bill that we passed out of committee. Teresa Wood from Waterbury, Representative Wood, was a great help on that. We worked together. So I'm glad to see that move forward and off to the Senate, where we passed it last week. We also, as Avram was talking about, I believe the child care bill was in my committee, and that took a lot of work. And I think we're going to see some substantial investments in child care and how we provide and make sure people have access to safe and affordable child care. This week, or last week, and continuing this week, actually, as soon as this meeting's over, I have another meeting with it. But the Office of the Child Advocate is a bill that I'm working on in our committee. Looks at how we make sure youth in state custody or in foster care transition to adulthood, and making sure that we are providing the best services that we can and really caring for these individuals. So hopefully this bill will pass out of committee tomorrow. I'm thinking maybe tomorrow late afternoon. We've been spending a lot of time on it. So really just looking at how this advocate is able to really look at the systems and how we make sure that the systems are working, and make sure that the legislature, how we can help by if there's any changes we need to make. We're not looking for someone in an adversarial role, someone who's going to go after DCF. It's not in our best interest. We really want to know what the problems are and how we can fix them, and how we can help children. So looking forward to seeing that move out of committee. So looking forward to any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. Kate Donnally, a new representative this year.
Hi, yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me. Yeah, Kate Donnally, newly elected, serving alongside Dan Noyes, serving Belvedere, Johnson, Hyde Park, and Wolcott. And I serve on the Judiciary Committee. I think listening to Dave, we were feeling very proud that we passed about 11 bills out of Judiciary, and then get to listen to Dave. Suddenly I feel dwarfed. But, I think sometimes politicians may want to shy away from some of the more controversial topics. And I've learned that when you serve on the judiciary, just about everything you're working on is controversial to some degree. So some of the things that we have worked on so far in session that I feel really proud of and excited about, a lot of good work strengthening criminal justice and law enforcement reform. We worked to ban the LGBTQ panic defense, strengthen hate crime legislation, did some good work in supporting victims of domestic violence, and did some, I think, significant work in terms of looking at definitions of consent within the law and how can we strengthen pathways to justice for those who have been victims of sexual assault and sexual violence, which includes the establishment of essentially a committee working group that would bring together colleges across the state to build sort of comprehensive approaches to issues of sexual violence on campus. And then right now, starting to steer into, again, some pretty non-controversial questions, such as whether or not firearms are allowed into governmental buildings, and expungement law are sort of two of the things that are popping up right now. I won't go too much into the rest. Everyone has pretty much covered some of the most significant legislation. You know, this week was my first true marathon week on the House floor, and it was quite an experience. And I think, you know, this is a really difficult time, clearly, for everyone. And I just honestly feel very grateful for my colleagues and leadership that we were able to move such significant legislation during a time when we're legislating virtually. That's not an easy thing to do. So obviously we will share differing opinions on things that will certainly arise within this upcoming discussion and ongoing discussion around pensions. But in the meantime, just want to give a shout out to my colleagues who are here. Thanks for all the really strong work.
Thanks very much, Kate. We have a couple of representatives who are not here, Lucy Rogers and Heidi Scheuermann. We won't be hearing from those today, but there's others that you can contact. We'll go over to our senator now, Senator Rich Westman. Rich, you want to enlighten us?
We're in the Senate. It's crossover. It's been crossover time, and we're reaching the tail end of the crossover piece. So we're busy in the Senate, but unlike the House, we don't have the budget right as we're doing that. But we have done some budget items in appropriations. H315, which is the fast track COVID bill. We moved that along. That has stuff in it like rental assistance and some of the scholarship programs for the colleges that we put in to those pieces. My morning committee is natural resources, and we've been working on the big weatherization package in there. I think it would be helpful for people. We've got this huge amount of federal money, the huge amount of federal money that's out there. We're limited on what we can do with that money. And, you know, it's supposed to be COVID related and to help us build a transition, but we can also use it on a lot of infrastructure things. So for me, when I think about how I want to spend that money, because we have an opportunity to do something for the future here with that, there's 4 areas that this 1.3 billion plus that we've got, I want to put the money towards the state colleges. I want to put the money towards broadband. I want to do it to help unemployed and lower middle class and middle class workers adjust to get to the other side, and that maybe a little business relief with that too. We can't use those ARA funds directly for pensions, but we can do some shifts to create some room in our own dollars to it. So the pension liabilities that we've got, those are the areas where I want to spend that money the most. And it helps me create a framework of how I set priorities as we move all of that money ahead. That's probably enough right now.
Thanks very much, Rich. Well, that's great. This was very fast for our representatives and senator to run through so quickly. This meeting, by the way, goes until 9 o'clock, and I neglected to add Mark Higley to the list of representatives who are not here. So it's open to questions right now. Any questions you have that are pertinent, you can raise your hand. Let's see. Somehow. or you raise your hand physically. Do whatever you want, but it's open now for any questions to our legislators. Dave.
I'd like to ask my fellow, no, I'm just teasing. I thought while people are thinking of their questions, I also omitted, Rich named some important sectors that are real important. We also in the House added $50 million for housing. And that's a really significant investment. At most, and rarely, we might do 15, sometimes rarely 20 million for the Vermont Housing Conservation Board. But housing is critical if we want a workforce that's, well, as you know, affordable housing, you can't do much without it. We've got roughly 2,000 people in our motels throughout the state. I think the federal assistance for that stops next fall. How do we move folks from that situation to something more stable? How do we help those who are in housing that they can't afford? So that's a good plan. I actually, I'm not sure we have the plan yet. We know we need to build more housing stock. We need to help make it affordable, but those resources will go a long ways towards doing that. I think we're going to need even more. So that you'll see that in our communities. Lamoille County will benefit from that. Just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. The first hand up is Tommy Gardner. Hello, Tommy. You're muted. There you go.
Good morning, everybody. I've got a couple questions, but I want to give everybody, a chance to, we'll rotate through. But I guess my first one is, and this is kind of the most pressing issue that or current event-y type stuff that we're dealing with at the local level, is the idea of Stowe pulling out of its merged school district. And I don't see Heidi here. I know she has opinions on it, so. But I mean, we also do have 2 Morristown Elmore reps as well as our senator, and anybody else who wants to weigh in about how policy or any issues are proceeding in the legislature, that any messages that you would give or any advice to constituents in those 3 towns on how to proceed. There still seems to be and Dave's here too, McAllister, so he may have some insight to it, but some confusion on what happens if Stowe votes to leave and what Morristown and Elmore are meant to do. And I just don't know if you have any insight from the Golden Dome on any of these answers to any of these questions.
Anybody want to venture on education? School merger?
Yeah.
Avram.
Yeah, I guess the answer is that I don't have any insights other than what I'm reading. As people will remember, I mean, these towns were in a supervisory union before the merger merged them into one school district, and Morrisville and Elmore had previously already merged, so that they were merged. And the controversial part was then a full merger with Stowe. And what I'm reading is in terms of is really more legal opinions and interpretations that I can't add to as to the effect of a vote. But it is apparent that there will be a vote in Stowe, and I'm not privy to any discussion in the legislature itself. I think a lot of that is at least at this time external to the legislature in terms of what the law allows or doesn't allow.
Thank you, Avram. Dave.
Thank you. On that topic, I think towns and school districts should be allowed to bundle or unbundle, whatever the proper word is, as they wish. There should be an opportunity for folks to separate if they need to. It may be unfortunate to some. It would be to me, but that's just one person's view. But what I wanted to mention is that between 2008 and 2019, Vermont spent approximately $212 million on bonded school construction. There has been identified a need for an additional $444 million statewide in bonded construction. And there's more needs than that. I think people have to sit back and say, our school buildings are aging out. You know, the old saying, if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. And is that the right approach? Or is this the opportunity for an aging infrastructure to rethink different ways through different affiliations and different cooperation to address what's going to be a bigger issue? Because that's a lot of tax burden for people to bear. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Now, we have another question from Dave McAllister. Dave, you weren't here on the beginning, but we introduced all board members. I understand you're a board member for the Lamoille Chamber, so welcome.
Yeah, actually, thanks for that, Jeff. My question was, I felt obligated as the chair-elect of the chamber to ask if any of our legislators would care to expand on what ideas have been thrown around for business relief with some of these federal dollars.
Dave.
Did I come through okay, or did I freeze?
No, you're fine.
Okay.
I just want to keep talking. I didn't want to keep jumping into. I think there's been a conversation. Businesses don't need loans; they need grants, and it should be targeted. And from where I sit, especially our hospitality industry, for maybe obvious reasons, though there are others. So there's ways to strategically target the investments for the gifts that hopefully keep on giving and will spur our economy, in my mind. I'm going to digress a little bit just to open the door. The governor has requested, and I'm glad that he did so, appreciate his leadership, of the federal government to consider bringing more refugees to Vermont. I think in the order of 300. We've had over 8,000 refugees come to Vermont since the mid-1980s, and I think they've really enriched our state. Many have brought with them a really unique work ethic. Our businesses need that. So when Dave's question, which I think is great, you can help businesses financially sustain themselves, cash flow, investments, et cetera. But if there aren't the workers, that's a real challenge. And yet, if more refugees come, I was speaking earlier, it competes with housing needs that we have. So it has to be a full comprehensive plan.
Thank you, Dave.
I would just say, I think that the legislature and the administration hasn't put out their proposals yet. And I suspect they've waited for the House. The federal COVID, this latest relief package coming out of the federal government, we're still working through the details about what that can all be spent on. And I might want to back up just a little bit. We're somewhat hampered here, but because we have the lowest unemployment rate in the country. And that is putting us in a position, particularly around the UI fund, where we can't get extraordinary help. We did put 151 million into business grants through the fall and going into the winter. I think there's, and the criticism of that was that that relief was very uneven. You know, some people got too much help, others not enough. You know, I would say in Lamoille County, where we have an unemployment rate 2.5 times what the state is, that we didn't put enough into the recreation industry, and that's where there'll be a focus. I think a lot of what people are going to be looking at going forward is, how do we pick out the areas that were somewhat left behind? How do we help them? And within the strings that are attached to that money, what can we do around those to create a full package out for the business community? We all know that the transition to through all of this to a fully opened economy again is going to be tricky and difficult. And part of the thing I would say about this federal COVID money is, we don't have to spend it all right now, and we don't have to have ideas of what we need to do right now for a year from now. And I would caution that if we think that we should spend it all right now, that leaves us with very little in a year from now, when there isn't going to be this federal money coming down. And so it might be better that we go a little slower, because this federal money doesn't have to be spent till December of 2024. And I can't tell you right at this moment what sectors of the economy a year from now are going to need a little help in that. So the idea of the House setting aside a little bit of the money in this, I think, is a good idea, and we should be a little cautious about the way we do that. But no one doesn't want to help businesses, and I think you can see that in what we've done over the last year.
Thank you, Rich. Before I get to you, John, Kate Donnally has something. John Mandeville has a question. So Kate, go ahead.
Sorry, my computer was having trouble unmuting. I am hesitant to raise my hand because I've been trying to sift through the details, but I did just want to add to the comments in response to that last question, that the conversation that has been had most recently within the House related to supporting businesses has been targeted around the businesses that sort of fell through the cracks the most in terms of federal stimulus spending. And the Commerce Committee just passed a pretty massive piece of legislation, a lot of which was aimed at those particular businesses, looking at how to create infrastructure and systems so that, for example, BIPOC businesses can access grants where they might not have otherwise. And there was many other initiatives as well. And I just, as we were talking, sent a text to someone who serves on that committee to try to get more of the bullet points around that. And I'm happy to follow up just via email if folks have questions about what was included in that, because I do think it most impacts our smallest businesses across the state.
Thank you, Kate. I want to stay on this subject. So John Mandeville, are you on this subject? And
Yes.
Dan, are you on this subject?
Yes, I am.
I just wanted to go ahead.
All right, go ahead, Dan. No, you're muted.
I'll be brief. I just wanted to say that, last time when this federal stimulus money came in, the guidance that we received kept getting updated. And so we just have to be careful as we allocate it out there that we don't have to give it back. And I do think that we should take our time. If we have time to spend this, the last stimulus money we got, we had to have it out the door by December 31st. And I think that if we had had the time to really think about that and those investments, we would be in even a better place. And then just kind of along the same lines, in the capital budget that we just passed in the House was the money for the completion of the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail. And so that's not a direct payment to businesses, but it definitely is not going to hurt having that as a way to bring people to little places outside of our tourism destination of Stowe. So looking forward to seeing that completed in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. John Mandeville, you have a question?
I don't have questions as much as I have comments. First of all, going back to the situation in Lamoille County and the higher unemployment rate, obviously that's true because of our heavy dependence on travel, tourism, and hospitality. Just wanted to point out that there is a program directly from the feds, not to the state, that's putting $27 billion nationally into a program that is specifically for food service operations. It's there. The applications open up in about a week and a half, I believe, but there's $27 billion available nationally in that program, and it's first come, first serve. We at the LADC are doing our best to get the word out. I know the chamber is too, but everybody needs to get the word out within the restaurant industry that there's money there, but they got to apply for it, and they need to do it as soon as the application opens. The other thing I wanted to talk about was Kate was talking about the bill going through coming out of Commerce, which she was referring to. Part of it was something called for gap financing. It has $10 million in it. It's a great program. Unfortunately, if you read the legislation, it's almost impossible to qualify for it. I'm just making that legislators aware of that. They need to look at it, because if you look at the detail, you know, as they say, the detail is what makes things go or not go. That's a great program, $10 million, but there's almost no business I can think of that's going to be able to jump through all the hoops that they've got in that legislation right now. The unemployment rate being low in the state, if you talk to Matt Barowitz, who is the state labor statistician, he will tell you that number is gotten at through smoke and mirrors, and it's actually closer to 10% in the statewide. So that's something else to bear in mind. We also, in addition to the 150 million that Rich was talking about to the fall and the winter, there was a technical assistance program that was launched and implemented in the fall that fed about $80,000 into the local community just for technical assistance to be provided to small businesses in dire need of that kind of assistance in Lamoille County.
Thank you, John. Is that it for you, John?
That's
okay.
it.
Greg Stefanski.
Thank you, Jeff. Good morning. Great to see folks. I guess a question to the legislators is I'm looking around this call. I see many members of both Lamoille Area Health and Human Services Response Command Center, and also many core partners to the Working Communities Challenge, which brought about $315,000 to the community through the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston. So I'm wondering, given that it is early and details are not clear about funding that's coming to our community, what do our legislators see as opportunities to connect with two initiatives that both have a year plus momentum behind them in some of these key areas that it seems the funds are intended for?
Any responses? Dave.
It's hard for, thank you. Greg, thanks for all your work and leadership of so many others who are working on this. But I would say, what's in your way? What do you need? Help me better understand what you're looking for, please.
Yeah, I think the first thing is just a connection points. We do have, for folks who are not familiar with the Health and Human Services Response Command Center, basically using the ICS model, we've got about 30 people who are actively engaged in addressing issues related to food, housing, employment, medical care, and mental health and substance misuse. We also have stood up a team that's focused on school and child care. And so we have received some funding, about $40,000 towards a budget to do some planning work over these next 6 months. So the timing may align very well to look at data, to assess how we've responded to these issues during the COVID era, but more importantly, to look forward to address some of the systemic issues. So for example, housing, was initially all about just transitioning folks from our local shelter, Lamoille Community House, to the hotels for under GA assistance, and to make sure that the food was available. Now that team is looking at how can we bring on more affordable housing units, partner with landlords in some unique ways. So a real shift from just immediate response to long-term planning. And so that kind of assessment is happening in each one of those key areas. And Ellen Hill is on the call is another one of our backbone organizations for the Working Communities Challenge, a group that's looking at barriers to successful employment, looking at challenges our businesses are facing. So Dave, I think the key thing is just connecting so we can get all on the same page. The goal with this next 6 months is to develop basically a strategic plan that looks at these core 6 areas, but really takes a whole community look at it and not just from one organization's perspective, even one sector's perspective. Working with Heather Hobart, Corey Purpall from Copley Hospital, we're trying to engage and keep all of our sectors connected. And I think the key thing is it'd be real helpful too, Dave. I don't know if there's going to be a point person from our community in the legislature who's going to be looking at the funds coming in and how to partner, but it would be wonderful if we could work together. The school districts are reaching out to us about their recovery plans, in communication with John Mandeville and Tasha Wallace from a county planning perspective. And we're going to be doing some outreach to the municipalities, the town administrators and select board chairs. And I guess I'd really want to make sure that we are in step with you all. And so if there's a point person from our Lamoille legislative crew, it would be great to partner together. So I don't know if that's possible to identify someone today or to follow up about that.
So I would just say in this, the new ARPA money that comes out, we can put out in big tranches in the details of that money and the rules around how that money can be spent. We had the whole congressional delegation and their staffs into Senate Appropriations and a group of committees in the Senate this past week. They're not going to have all of the regulatory rules on that money put together for another 6 weeks. That's about the end of our legislative session. So we won't know the details about how all of that money can be spent. That's one of the reasons I would say I'm happy to move stuff on projects and things that we know immediately. But I don't want to spend all of the money because clearly our community is changing the way Greg talks in the way we create emergency responses. And that's partly come out of the community that we are, but I think it's been pushed along by the pandemic and COVID and the things we've had to deal with. And I want to make sure that we have enough money left over to be able to match where we're going as we come out of this. So to spend it all is not a good idea. And we aren't going to know the details of how we can spend all that money until May or June. And we have time. So I think it's really important for Greg, your group to tell us what you need as you know, so we can work on that with the administration. There's got to be some people in the administration that help us think about how to move to the next steps and where we're going.
Thanks, Rich. Kate, you have something.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just a comment. I mean, I so appreciate the work that's been happening locally in this area, and I feel like it really reflects what we have known for so long is really best practice in terms of how to support our community and bringing together players from all entities and being able to work collectively in this way is really what so much of our human service and education policy is built around it. We recently passed legislation around community schools, and it's almost a version of what you guys are creating that's sort of decentered from schools. But this idea on a programmatic level that you can go to sort of one space and access all kinds of resources and support for the community. And I think what comes up for me in these conversations, like, Greg, I think you've been doing a good job of reaching out and saying, hey, like, we need support around this. And I keep sort of putting feelers out there, and there's just no clear funding stream for this kind of effort. And it's one of these really challenging and frustrating things where it's like, well, this is where we want to be heading, but our funding streams aren't designed that way. They're designed in these silos, which is really what we're trying to move away from. And so I think it's just a really unfortunately challenging issue. And I guess maybe part of what I just want to say is that I am eager to be a partner with you guys in figuring out how to make this work. Outside of session, I would be more available. I'm happy to come to meetings and start really getting a more intimate understanding of where you guys are headed. I think what's tricky, and I'm not to put anyone else on the spot, but I serve on judiciary. It feels like some of the things you guys are looking for would fit better into some other committees. But we can have that conversation in another space. But I just want to name that I fully support the efforts, and it's not simple, and we're just going to have to keep sort of like banging on some doors and having some hard conversations to try to figure out how to keep the work sustainable, because it would be a real shame if it fell apart because we couldn't find proper avenues to fund it.
Thank you, Kate. And I want to move over to Dan Noyes, but before I do that, I want to introduce Lucy Rogers, who joined us late. She probably has no clue what we're talking about, the specific issue, but if she has something to offer at some point in time, Lucy, welcome to our legislative breakfast. This meeting does go another 15 minutes. It's scheduled to end at 9 o'clock. So let's try to keep that in mind. Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll be brief. All this federal money that we've been talking about, well, there's also other pots of federal money that Vermont is going to see, and that is that under this last funding bill, they doubled the size of AmeriCorps in this country. So it went from a $1 billion federal agency to a $2 billion federal agency. I've been working with Senator Ram on how we can kind of figure out what that's going to look like with AmeriCorps members coming into the state around housing, and still just really seeing what the rollout's going to look like, but you're going to start seeing a lot more AmeriCorps members around. And if we can figure out how to kind of tackle some of our bigger problems with this funding source, then we'll probably be better off after this is all over. So not sure exactly what it's going to look like, but we're really trying to figure out some whether it's weatherization or rehabbing houses or protecting floodplains where we have manufactured homes or these manufactured home parks. So anyways, I'll just leave it at that. It's still in just getting this information out. So thanks.
Thanks, Dan. Dave Yacovone. Dave, do you have a comment?
I'll try to be brief. Oftentimes people come to legislators without a defined ask, and it's hard for us to figure that out. It's helped me a little bit, Greg, for you to help frame this. Couple of suggestions. Though I can't imagine he would have all the answers at this time, but using your AHS field director as a conduit for all things human services, obviously, and the people he reaches out to probably won't yet have all those strings pulled together in a cohesive way, but they'll be working on it. Education is harder. Any one of us can help you liaison with them. Harder in that they don't have a comparable, to my understanding, position. But as you do know, there's a lot of federal money, I think $5 million coming into our overall AHS Morrisville district. That's a lot of money for different purposes. But I wanted to point out, and I don't think it's that well defined. I suspect the Senate will define it. But the House has put $250 million in for investments in the health and well-being of families and small businesses to create an equitable, resilient Vermont. Well, what does that mean? Help define it. My sense is it's open broadly like that because no one's sure exactly, but it will get defined. And the more you can articulate your message to, once we find the fund, who manages that, should it prevail. That's an opportunity to say, we have an idea, state government, and we want to do the following. Can you help us do this? Here's our proposed metrics to measure it. Here's how we think things will be different, etc. The hard work for you, I think, is to pull all the different local players together to come together with that. But it sounds like you do have some of your grant resources to do that. I wish you the best of luck. No.
Thanks, Dave. Jessica, you had your hand up a little while ago. Are you still interested in a question?
It wasn't a hand up, it was a high five for the AmeriCorps. That was exciting news. So
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, Michael.
Hi, how you doing? I just wanted to first really thank the folks on the technical committee in the House about Avram. You and I had a conversation early last year about trying to do something, and I know we're still a long ways off, but I think things seem more hopeful than they have this whole time period, so really appreciate that work. Some other areas that we touched on, the housing piece, and I think one of the efforts that we've been able to make is to determine that we're talking about maybe somewhere between 40 and 80 smaller housing needs. And what I mean by that is studio, 1 bedroom, and a somewhat added number to that of 2 and 3 bedroom situations for families. But I think we're really struggling with time frames. So partially what you said, Rich, is helpful in terms of thinking about this not as being something that has to be over the finish line in 6 months, but I think there's a lot of struggle about looking at how we get something off the ground that can utilize the short-term federal money and then still be viable on the other side of it. And it feels a little bit like we don't necessarily have all the resources we need to make those kind of decisions and planning pieces. So I would really, I think, you know, Will Eberly, our field rep is super, but does get pulled a lot into the Barry area for things that are happening over there. And we have a lot of situations where we are kind of a little hamstrung with not having a full-time or more time person who oversees things through the HS lens. And Will works a lot of extra time for us trying to make sure and carries good ideas from Barry district over to here. But we still really find that there are times when like nobody has any more time to write anything else for a grant that seems really useful, but we just haven't got the horsepower to do it. So I'd say that's one of the areas that we have a challenge in. And kind of to emphasize that a little bit, Heather and us have been working on trying to do some criminal justice pieces, and we have a grant application into corrections for some housing pieces for coordinated reentry. But I've been working on some pieces around the state police to get us to be one of the few counties that don't have any embedded mental health people with the state police, and stumbled upon the challenge that we have that under the current situation, we might be eligible to get a half of a position. That half a position would have to cover the entire Williston Barracks territory, which is from the edge of Wolcott all the way over to Charlotte and down to just next door to Fayston and up to Colchester and Milton. And so the idea that I'm going to get much horsepower out of a 20-hour-a-week person who's covering, you know, an area of at least 150,000 people where 125 of them live in another county other than ours is going to make it pretty difficult. It's another place where we kind of got cut off a little bit, and it's hard, I see in this county, to make things work when we kind of always get sort of half a loaf or a shared loaf. I know we're small, but it does make some things a lot more challenging to be able to come up with some kind of solution for. And Dave, I wanted to also thank you for your efforts in your appropriations committee, and then turn to you, Rich, and say, so in your appropriations committee, if you can be, if you need any information on any of the areas that I just talked about, I'd be glad to share that with you, because I think I see that we're on an opportunity to do some really good stuff and do catch up to a lot of the other areas of the state that have had some financial help to get some of these things together. And it would be super if we could kind of leapfrog into making this a lot smoother process for us. So, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Tommy.
Thanks, and thanks, and Chamber folks, Tess and Jeff particularly. I was looking at the website just now, and this I didn't know if there's gonna be another one after this, and it looks like this is the last one. And so I was gonna go with kind of a philosophical question for you all. You know, if everything goes right by the time the legislative session ends, if it ends normally, which, yay, you know, every Vermonter presumably could at least be, you know, scheduled for the vaccine. And if indeed, you know, the world is kind of opening up come July into some semblance of normalcy, I dare say you in this is going to be a very two-part biennium like never seen before. And I'm just wondering philosophically over the summer and whatnot, after this all ends, what kind of constituency outreach are we looking at, and what kind of ways are you seeking constituency input into what, you know, people kind of assessing, you know, 14, 15 months under a pandemic, and like in you know, obviously we're looking ahead. You've got a lot of budget and crossover work to do right now, but I mean, if you have any kind of ways that the community can reach out, and how what you're hoping to hear from them.
Thanks, Tommy. Sounds like an open question to all legislators. Dan.
Let Lucy go first. She's
All right. We'll let Lucy go first so everybody can hear her voice.
Okay, thanks. I also just wanted to say good morning, everybody. And I'm sorry I missed the bulk of the conversation, but I'm glad to be joining for a few minutes. But I will say I am so, if things go as expected with vaccine rollout and the vaccines are effective against all of the variants, which I think is, that's an if, but if things go as expected and there is a safe opportunity to be opening up a bit this summer, I am just so excited to be kind of seeing people around town again. And I've done the best I possibly can to stay connected during COVID, but it's hard, and it really highlights kind of that digital divide of the people. I feel so strongly the disconnect between the portion of the community that has access to me as their state representative right now, and the portion that doesn't, due to the requirement to communicate digitally. So I think the biggest thing I'm looking forward to is just kind of being more in the flow of, feeling like on a day-to-day level, I have more of kind of the pulse of the whole community. And as far as, I think you asked kind of specifically, a huge thing is just being at events and being out and about, and people are usually at a certain level of investment in a specific issue by the time someone decides to sit down and write an email to their legislator. So that's a really different lens of what people are thinking about than you just go out to to the Wednesday music in Jeffersonville and ask someone, so what's on your mind? And you get a totally different answer than when people are so invested in one specific issue to reach out. And both are important, but I really miss kind of the unsolicited, what are you thinking about today? I happen to bump into you. And then the other thing, which I'm going to sound like I maybe will be in the minority in this, but I'm really looking forward to knocking on doors again. And I think that's kind of the most, that's one of the most just real ways to get a very accurate sense of where everybody's at, because it's not it's not the people who have access to the internet and feel comfortable with email. It's not the people who come out to the Wednesday night music. You know, it's just every house going and asking what's on people's minds. So I'm actually looking forward to that.
Thank you, Lucy. It's 9 o'clock and I'm going to let everybody speak, but is this really our last meeting, Tess? This is our last legislative breakfast?
That would be correct, yes.
All right. Well, I'm gonna just create a little summary for us. I want to bring special attention to Tess Milner. Tess managed these things from start to finish and has done an just outstanding job. She's so much fun to work with. And we've put these things together. So we're very, very, very happy for Tess's effort. Thank you, Tess. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. And I guess we're going to do these things again next year because they're fun. And so with that, I'll say thank you. And Kate, so I have Kate, Dan, and Avram with raised hands. So Kate, you go first.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I will, reiterate everything that Lucy said. I'm really looking forward to being able to connect with people in person. But I'll also say that I do think one of the rare silver linings in this has been that having things via Zoom and on technological platforms has made content much more accessible to many people. And, Dan and I have been holding these monthly constituent meetings. We've had about 3 now, and the last couple we've had, I think we had 22 people yesterday, and those are recorded and they're streamed on YouTube, and you can share the links and people can come back to it. And so I think in addition to, just the excitement of being around actual humans again, I keep thinking about what aspects of this do I want to continue. Would we continue to do Zoom-based meetings once a month because it lets people pop on their computer rather than having to come to a coffee shop on a Saturday morning, and it allows people greater access to watch it at double time after their kids go to bed, which I know for me has been a huge benefit. So just trying to think about how do we keep some of the things that have been helpful in this process and then get back to some of the things that we're most looking forward to.
Thanks, Kate. Dan.
Yeah, Tuesday Night Live, Wednesday Night Live. I can't wait to get back out and talk to people in person, go to in-person meetings, select board, planning commission, whatever you got. And I can't wait to delete Zoom off my computer. I really can't. It'll be the first thing that I do as soon as possible. I'll just leave it at that. Thank you for hosting.
Thank you, Dan, very much. Avram.
Yes, one of the things that I want to hear about in terms of, the question was phrased philosophically. What I want to hear from people when this is over or almost over is what have we learned and what do we keep from what we've learned during this time? What do we keep among the community networks in Lamoille County and elsewhere across the state that have developed and been successful and powerful forces in helping people? Which of those do we want to keep? What of the legislative function that we now do virtually do we want to keep in terms of public access? Those are the kind of questions I want to hear. Like we really learned we've learned a lot of things during this time. Some of this we will be very happy not to have to deal with again. Some of it is things we've learned that we want to learn from it and keep doing. So that's what I want to hear from people about.
And a group of red polls and a group.
Thank you, Avram. And I think it's great to end. We can end this meeting with our Senator Rich Westman.
Well, let me say, I agree with Avram. I want to keep some of this. I can't wait to go back to some things in person. And what I would say about the Zoom medium in the legislature is the concentration of the way this is, it empowers the powerful in the legislative process. There's very little chance for you to meet up with 2 or 3 of your colleagues for me in the Senate, in the cafeteria, and say, you know, I agree with the overall direction that of what the speaker, the president pro tem, or the governor put together, but I don't like this piece. And in the Senate, if you, I get 2 other people and I walk in the president pro tem's office, the 3 of us together represent 10% of the body. And so it's easy to get somebody's attention when you can do that. If you've been on Zoom 10 or 12 hours in a day, it's virtually impossible to get your colleagues in and do that sort of thing. So in the process, and I think Zoom will continue to hold a function. People look at what we do afterwards. But I will say for people like me, and I have the whole county, there's no opportunity now out in the community for me to go to events and somebody come up and say, I think this about this in a quick fashion, and me to acknowledge that. The amount of emails that I get now with no staff in a job that pays, you know, $12,000, $14,000 a year with no benefits is crushing. I'm on Zoom or Teams or now I've had some days that were up to 14 and 15 hours in a day. And it's crushing what the whole level of this and the impersonal nature that this is I will welcome coming back, but I do want to save pieces of it. You know, if it's a stormy day in January, I'd much rather be here doing this Zoom in that. But when spring comes, I want to be out seeing people. And I miss seeing people. I so miss Tuesday Night Live. Wednesday night at the Oxbow in Morrisville. We need to think about what we want to keep and where we want to go. And but the human nature of stuff and that human connection, I miss.
Jeff, can I make a 10-second comment?
Yep, John.
Okay. This is probably my swan song with this organization. Having been in this position for 11 years at the LADC, I am retiring in June. So this will probably be the last time I see some of you. So I wanted to tell you that it's been very wonderful to be in this position, to get to know many of you on a very personal basis. But I'm not going anywhere. I'll still be around.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Thank
John,
you.
your work throughout the pandemic, particularly, which is how I've gotten to know you the best, has just been absolutely over the top helpful. And it's just made such a big impact. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I'll reach out and say to our senator and our representatives, thank you from all your constituents for showing up at these meetings and participating with us, because it's been a very, very positive learning experience for all of us. Thank you very much. And thank you, John, for 11 years. Feels longer, John. I don't know, does it feel longer to you?
Thank you, John.
Okay. Thank you all. See you next
Yep.
year.